Hello and most welcome to 1960 of the H series. We will continue the Derrida that we started in 1957. The Revelation according to Jacques Derrida by John P. Manoussakis. Last time we talked about the conceptualization of God, the God becoming evil or religion becoming evil, the evilization of God, so to speak, the making of God to evil. How we go from, in German, Gott to Götzen. Manoussakis pointed especially to Immanuel Kant, the Königsbergian philosopher of all Prussia. How he, maybe in the wake of Newton, spoke that God comes after morality. So first we have morality, and then comes God. It's a bit akin, I would say, to the Newtonian idea that first the world is constructed by God and then he disappears. So he has no connection to the most important things. What is, and morality, why it is. Idi anthropos to prosopon muke. Muke zizeste. This is from Acts. If we are indeed God's offspring, we ought not to think of divinity as something like a statue of gold or stone or a product of man's mind and his art. It took me a while to think of this, but it is actually the cosmological fallacy. To think that God is within one's own mind is not entirely dissimilar to say that the cosmos is within one's mind. Can, so to speak, stand outside of the universe. God is something beyond imagination, not under the law to be or not to be, a human law. It's much greater than that. I'd say proofs of God's existence and similar things makes God into a concept. Only. God goes beyond that. I'd say way beyond that. Nietzsche knows very well that the distance from Gott to idol is a short one. Gott to Götze. We are in the, as to quote Fisher, we are in the unconscious habit of turning everything into things, objects. We assume that there is an inner equivalent of what is outer. This separation of inner and outer is the object and the perception of object. Something that Stephen M. Rosen, taken from Merleau-Ponty, called subject in front of space, where object is situated, or subject in front of object situated in space, in the room. The Newtonian room. We are onlookers at the theater of reality, and God is just an actor. There is a pointing to here in Judaism and Islam that is not really the case there. But just let me say, Allahu Akbar, God is great. Maybe that greatness is because it is not folded into a pre-arranged concept. Let's continue on page 320, the second paragraph and the last word in 1957 was the terrifying reality of the real. And it's an indication of how we use concepts or inner objects, if to use Eugene Fisher, to shield ourselves, to put the object's reality away from ourselves, a sort of protection. We screen. God are actually the very opposite. Screens were protecting against the terrifying reality of the real. Of the real. Derrida, however, has tried to anticipate this argument by assigning both Eucharist and the Incarnation and also the resurrection to the strange logic of what he calls, as we have already seen, immunization. Immunization. Whether it is a question of the kenotaph, of the tomb without corpse, or the void of kenosis, that absence or emptiness the disappearance of the body does not necessarily contradict the appeal to visibility or to the image. The image. The image. In a certain manner, television itself would be the figure. The appeal to the media, is the disappearance of the body, whether because there is no longer a corpse or because it has become wine and bread, wafer, spiritualized, blood and body, spectralized, virtualized, sanctified, and consumable. Certain Christian theologians can denounce, no doubt, television as a as a perversion. Perversion. But that does not necessarily go against this logic. Logic. Theology always has more resources than one believes. Than one believes. One believes. 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 Television is conjured not as a spiritualizing spectralization, but as the temptation of a new idolatry, a pagan cult of image. Evil for this theology is the carnal temptation of the idol, not the spirituality of the icon. Of the icon. Of the icon. it becomes more and more evident here that Derrida seems to show a preference for the invisible voice that commands, "Hear, O Israel," or proclaims, "La ilaha illa ilah, la ilaha illa illallah." Or to be more precise, a preference for the transcendence of the voice over the immanence of the image. How very well put. This kind of preference, evidenced again and again under a variety of rubrics, be it the infinite other, the infinite other, the infinite other, absolute justice, unconditional hospitality, or pure gift, justifies placing Derrida, as recently Giorgio Agamben did, in that tradition of transcendence that goes via Levinas and Husserl. Husserl, Husserl. Back to Kant. But by pursuing such Kantian ideas as the infinite, the absolute, the absolute, the absolute, the absolute, or the pure, do we not sacrifice at the end what constitutes a concrete human experience? Experience, come in, echo, experience, hear out. My echo, where are you? Where art thou? And without the concreteness of human life, which is always to be understood historically and corporally, are we left susceptible to the abstractions of fundamentalism and fetishism fetishism and fundamentalism. Fundamentalism. For instance, the Quran that is untranslatable, or the Torah that is untouchable, untouchable, untouchable. And is not evil all the more possible once we traded the person for the idea, even if that is the idea of God. In a recent exchange with Yvonne Sherwood, she rightly, I believe, reminded me that no faith and no tradition is immune to the collapse of fetishism or fundamentalism. 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 The way certain Protestant denominations read the Bible as a text outside context. Outside context. Fragmented is undeniably fetishistic, and this proves that fundamentalism is by no means endemic. Endemic. Endemic.
Endemic.
Endemic. Zdravo, Mirja.
Zdravo.
Endemic. Only to Islam or only to Judaism. Judaism, Judaism. My argument here is not to identify what I believe is a certain pathology of our theologies with this or that community, but rather to show that any imbalance in the chiasmus between transcendence and immanence constitutes the inception of ideology, that the two, flesh and spirit, should be better taken as the Christic formula that Chalcedon advises. Advises. Without division, without confusion, confusion. Confusion.
Confusion.
Confusion. Confusion. Confusion. And does not the flesh sometimes turn into a text? Sherwood contests. And every time we read the Torah, the scriptures, be it the Torah, the Gospels, or the Quran, doesn't a curious intercontamination between the body of the text and the body as flesh takes place. After all, both constitutes a corpus Christi, Corpus Christi in Texas. Corpus Christi. And as they were writing, he took papyrus and blessed and tore it and gave it to them and said, "Take, this is my body." And he took ink, and when he had given thanks, he gave it to them, and they drank of it. They drank of it. And he said, "This is the blood of the New Testament, which is poured out for many,
Yummy.
many. I would be delighted as another John in Patmos to take the scroll of his body and eat it. Eat it. My problem lies precisely with that attitude that in principio prohibits even the possibility that there ever be such a thing as his body and blood, textual or otherwise. Even if this is taken to be, and here Derrida, I think, would agree with me, a possibility for the impossible, a possibility for the impossible. And there we end the lovely article by John Manoussakis. It was way too short, but very condensed though. Quite happy with this article. Good old Derrida was allowed to come back to us and shine forward. Monsieur Jacques, he knows what he's talking about. Jacques Derrida. He grew up as a Jew in Algeria that was ruled by Christians and surrounded by Muslims. So he was bothly entrenched in the Torah, the Quran, and the Bible. I will make a parallel. I will put some thinking. I know it was a rather small bit left, so I added some of my own stuff here. Many years ago, I went to the Indian province of Kerala, southwestern part of the subcontinent. And there is a Thomistic religious community already instigated by St. Thomas. And what is clear there are both especially the Torah is very present there. When the Christians came there circa 200 BC, I think it must have been AD, 200 AD or 300 AD, somewhere in that region. There were already Jews that had been there before Christ, maybe 100, 200 years before Christ. And they didn't have these sharp conceptual corners, I think is hinted to in this text, not the fundamentalism or undeniable fetishistic that is endemic today or pandemic. It was more osmosis, open-ended. A lot can be recognized as being Jewish in a Karelian Mass. The veil is very prevalent. It covers the interior of the church, covers what Derrida here mentioned and Manoussakis, the emptiness of the inner, where the priest sanctifies the bread and the wine and then exits from the veil. In this osmotic nature here, there is less of the auto-immunization. It's a stronger religious character. It doesn't have to conceptualize itself. Entrance of other tendencies from Judaism are actually making the whole thing stronger. it adds strength to it. And I think it's a sort of pharmacon, if you like, against the tendency of over-conceptualization. And also made it more possible to have a more living apostolic succession, a more living tradition. It was very alive, true to the heart, not the concept, true to the heart, the blood, rather than the concept. In the quote here from Derrida on page 320, go up a bit there. If you go up a bit, color there, please. Yeah, perfect, yeah. To the strange, I will start mid-sentence, to the strange logic of what he calls, as we have already seen, auto-immunization, whether it is a question of the cenotaph, of the tomb without corpse, or the void of the kenosis, the absence or emptiness, the apeiron, the disappearance of the body does not necessarily contradict the appeal to visibility or to the image. There need not to be a contradiction. Both can be present, could even strengthen it. It is more this monoculture with only concepts, which is more problematic. It is skewed, and I'd say possibly too one-sided. And that could lead to the diminishing of God, as I mentioned in the entrance here, diminishing of a God to just a concept that needs to be sharp, and thereby also defined in what it is not, in its absence. That did not happen in Kerala. Christianity was never defined in that it was not Jewish or not Islam or Hinduistic. Instead, it was an open border, it made for a healthy system, and I would say, like our bodily immune system, it fares better with some dust, maybe some infections, some bacteria, some virus, not too much, but neither too little. It makes for openness, but also inner chaotic strength. That is the order of the strange attractor that we mentioned many times in connection with chaos theory. What builds a strange thing is the acceptance of differences, like a galaxy or a maelstrom. We go down a bit underneath the quote, if you please, Kalle. It becomes more and more evident here that Derrida seems to show a preference for the invisible voice that commands, "Hear, O Israel," or proclaims, "La ilaha, ilah, illah," or to be more precise, a preference for the transcendence of the voice over the immanence of the image. So if you get too far away, you lose the presence or the immanence of the image, which is warned against in this quote further down, beginning with "but" 4 lines from where you are now from the bottom, just after Kant. But by pursuing such Kantian ideas as the infinite, the absolute, or the pure, do we not sacrifice the end at the end what constitutes a concrete human experience? So we need to have both, otherwise we lose, we become too idealistic, too much into the black box, into the scarabee, into the beetle box, the Kaffeeschachtel. Remember the Kaffeeschachtel. And the last sentence put even more fuel into that. And is not evil all the more possible once we have traded the person for the idea, even if that is the idea of God? How true. It makes me think of Stalinistic communism, where ideas were much more important than immanence. People, persons. The goal was otherworldly, therefore, without criterion. The 5-year plans did not need a criterion to show whether they were right or wrong. Nothing in this world could disprove them. They were fantastic. They were sheer transcendence. So we need both immanence and transcendence. Somewhere in between, we find this golden measure in between, often called the Fibonacci sequence, which is just in between. It's a beautiful architecture for a house. It's a fantastic harmony for a painting or for a photograph, but also for what we seem to prefer, the beautiful in between. There's a lot of warnings to the end. I will give just one more from the text. The next column. Yvonne Sherwood, she rightly, I believe, is the first sentence, reminded me that no faith and no tradition is immune to the collapse of fetishism or fundamentalism, the way certain Protestant denominations read the Bible as a text outside context is undeniably fetishistic. And this proves that fundamentalism isn't by no means endemic only to Islam or only to Judaism. This is over-conceptualization. If solo scriptura of Luther becomes over-prevalent, we risk to strand in this one-sidedness, this cyclopic one-eyedness. Broaden, take the Klein bottle, let the exogenous go into the endogenous, and the endogenous go to the exogenous. In this movement, in this exchange, that could also be the laminal zone in the Norwegian coastline, so often mentioned, maybe too often. The Norwegian coastline. We could, as the finishing line here, if we accept the Norwegian coastline and open up to the outside, let the outside come in and the inside come out. The last finishing sentence is much more hopeful, and I agree 100%. Even if this is taken to be, and here Derrida, I think, would agree with me, a possibility for the impossible. Once we leave that limitation of conceptualization and sharp borders, anything is possible, even the impossible. And I would say a conceptualization of God is a limitation on what he can do. It's an extensive limitation, and we depersonalize God as well, making him into this sheer transcendence, making him into something we can keep in our head, like we keep something in our wallet, like a coin. And I think Paul Feyerabend wasn't far away, considered modern way of seeing God as almost a coinage of God, making him into an object countable and due to the logic of existing or non-existing. No, the impossible is there. Mr. Lundahl.
Thank you, thank you. Let's go to page 320. There is a...
Mr. Lundahl.
Thank you.
Mr. Lundahl, indeed.
There is a Roman proverb coined by the poet Horace, who said that even Homer sleeps sometimes.
Yeah.
And I think here actually Derrida is sleeping a little bit. I explain. Did you notice how often do you see this phrase? Does not necessarily contradict. Not necessarily. So then he repeats not necessarily go against his logic. Okay, you had this phrase. It's not big deal perhaps.
No.
But what is important is he Derrida tries to justify as if contradictions are not necessary. Derrida is implying that, or he's trying to justify the idea that contradictions are necessary. And he knows very well that contradictions are necessary, but here he is a little bit cautious, as if he's not believing it fully himself in this case.
Interesting.
And why are contradictions necessary? We need contradictions.
Indeed.
You have it on the next page, 321. The keyword is contamination.
Yeah.
And this shows that actually we need contradictions. So it's unnecessary. Derrida is actually creating himself unnecessary contradictions.
Hmm.
Or the contradictions are always intercontaminated.
Oh, yeah. Intercontaminated. How great. Yeah.
And yes, I love this last page. There are many great ideas here that summarizes many of the ideas that we had discussed in the past.
Oh, yeah. That's such
Like
a
the
great
protest,
text. Such a
like the
great text.
Protestant believe that you can take a text outside context, and here actually Derrida is also implying that in one way, that you can perhaps there is a possibility to be there without context, but that's not really a healthy way of looking at things. You need the you need both contradictions, but you need also contexts.
Context and contemplation and yeah.
These two C's that we need: contradictions and contamination. And contradictions are necessary because everything is intercontaminated, as quantum physics shows, for instance.
Yeah.
Like the Norwegian coastline that you mentioned. And when you have the Norwegian coastline, or any coastline for that matter, where can you draw the line between what is land and what is the sea? The sea is always more or less contaminated with the land. There is no harsh borders. It's not healthy to make it.
No. And you can compare that, the existence of something, the land, and the non-existence of what's outside the land. It's like estane and non-estane, but actually it's in the liminal zone that everything happens. The liminal zone, in between.
I give the word to Mirja if she wants to say something.
Yeah, just to complement maybe on the the contradictions and what was the other on C? I just forgot the name now. Contradictions and can you help?
Contamination.
Contamination.
Or
Yeah.
intercontamination.
Intercontamination. Yeah, intercontamination. You know, I'm just currently working with identification of some visual symbols and interconnectedness between Hypatia of Alexandria and St. Catherine. And yes, and it's actually amazing, even though one was just pagan and then the other was early Christian or Christian. They are so, I mean, the stories, the visual symbols, everything is so intercontaminated. Even Hypatia has the will as well. I mean, the will that generates knowledge and then also generates her sufferings. I mean, it's also similar, like with the will with the Catherine. So everything, even though it's pagan and Christian, everything is intercontaminated. But there is also liminal space in between the two, and they're exactly at the liminal space where all the research becomes that interesting.
Yeah, exactly. That's the golden zone, I call it.
Yeah, exactly.
Thank you, Mirja. Now I want to only to add one C more. So to have a healthy, what do you call it? A healthy view on things, as quantum physics shows and everything, philosophy shows that you need actually 3 C's to have a healthy outlook on life and studies and religion, whatever. And these C's are context, contradictions, and contamination. All these are necessary: context, contradictions, and contamination.
Very good.
And every attempt to eliminate one of these C's, context, contradiction, or contamination, will not end well.
No, it would be too one-sided. It would be cyclopic in vision, a limited view that becomes megalomaniac and said it has conquered all. That is actually the case in the cosmological fallacy, where you think you can put cosmos in your mind, because the cosmos then becomes very limited, very limited, and sharp. It's an overdue sharpness. I just shortly explained to Mirja the cosmological fallacy, and it is about, how can I explain this? Two scientists, one scientist and a philosopher. The scientist's name is Lee Smolin, a physicist, and the other one is Roberto Unger, a philosopher, scientist when it comes to sociology or science of state, politics. If you need to leave, Kalle, I understand. Yes. And they wrote a book, and what they tried to explain was that one of the big problems in physics is that Newton, and since Newton, we try to have we started with an idea to put the whole universe in one formula, and that somehow we could observe the universe outside the universe. Like we could keep it in our calculations, in our formulas, and observe it from an impossible position, a position from nowhere, as Thomas Nagel would have it. And it's very similar to what Derrida Manoussakis is pointing to here, the conceptualization of God, that he is so small that he can actually be, oh, there he is, that he actually can be fitted into our into our limited conceptual mind. Whereas, well, there you have the book, The Singular Universe and the Reality of Time.
That's the book they wrote together, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's it. And that book really helped us to press forward. And I think, I don't know if you're still there, Kalle. I think after that book, we started with Wittgenstein, or maybe it was a lapsus in between that book. But it really helped. It helped immensely.
I'm ordering it this weekend.
Are you kidding? Wow, yeah. Why not? I also made a series of it, so I have recorded actually the whole book. The whole book I recorded.
Really?
Yes, I did.
Where is it? Is it on your channel?
It's on my channel, yeah. It's on my
I will check.
I don't know how my voice was at that time, but possibly it's still audible, yeah. But the connection between physics and philosophy and deconstruction here, as in Derrida, and a lot of other areas, medicine. We went into medicine and seeing that the autoimmune systems, they need this intercontamination, with a tough word, yeah. To be working. And there, for instance, we took up how allergies, asthma became prevalent, especially in families with connection to doctors in the early 20th century.
Wow.
They brought hygiene from the hospital. It is a good thing, hygiene, and they brought hygiene from the hospital to their homes and started to clean it excessively. And that happened just before the Great War, the First World War. And then allergies spread into the upper classes, the middle classes, and didn't reach the working class until after the Second World War. Very interesting. It has its similarities here.
Yeah.
And we also looked into, I shouldn't speak too much, but
No, please go ahead. I follow.
A person that
We looked into Derrida, death.
Life, Death, yeah. An excellent article by Derrida, and also Merleau-Ponty in the shape of an American philosopher called Stephen M. Rosen, whom we also interviewed a couple of times. I think 5 times we spoke to him over the Zoom.
You spoke to him?
Yes, we recorded it. It is on YouTube.
Wow. I'll check also that immediately after this talk.
It was a bit scary. He was the most intelligent person I ever spoke to. But a very kind man. A very kind man. And he has a helping tool, as is called the Klein bottle. And the Klein bottle is the true depiction of space. This is once more coming from physics, or in this case, more geometry. And you can see that space itself is interpenetrating or intercontaminating. That would be the proper word there.
Mm-hmm.
He used the expression interpenetration. Oh, there you have it. So this odd space is actually the true shape of space. It's not 3 perpendicular axes, X, Y, Z, usually with a timeline T.
Yes.
This is more how space is in quantum mechanics. And oddly enough, you can put liquid into this thing. I have one at home. But it has only one plane. It is not 3-dimensional. It's incredibly odd.
But it has really great aesthetics.
Yeah, I think it does.
For me, it looks beautiful. I rarely say beautiful about objects or forms. I rarely say beautiful, like they're neutral to me. But this, when I look at it, is so appealing, you know?
Yeah. And you see the inside creates the outside, and the
yes, completely Asherian.
Yeah,
you know,
yeah,
completely Asherian.
yeah, indeed. This is how it looks in glass.
Is it the object you have at home?
Yeah, I have one at home. I can. The next lecture we do from home, I'll show it for the camera.
Actually, where have you purchased it? Where have you bought it?
I got it as a present 2 years ago from someone who sometimes joins these meetings and the recordings. He lives in Stockholm, Henrik.
Mm-hmm.
He gave it as a gift for me when we had our conference in Sköllersta.
Okay.
2 years ago. And I managed not to break it. It's very fragile, it turned out, but I dropped it in the floor like 2 times.
Wow.
And then somebody told me that, oh, Hans, it's very fragile. Oh, I didn't know. Well, maybe we should round up. Some finishing comments, Miriam?
No, thank you. Thank you for all the exposés, and it was really wonderful.
Thank you very much for coming. I'm so privileged that you join our little laughing and singing meetings we have.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Thank you for honoring me.
Have a very nice day. God bless you.
The same. God bless you. Bye.
Bye bye. Bye bye.